The Kansas City Chiefs made Trey Smith the highest paid guard in the NFL today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back for another episode of Locked On Chiefs, your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you for making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well. I'm your host, Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to what is just going on in Kansas City. Kansas City had the lone franchise tag player headed into the franchise tag deadline. They got him signed to a long-term massive extension for a guard, and it's going to be something that we're going to have to talk about. We're going to get into the salary cap implications of what this means for Kansas City for the future and for this year. How does it shift in possibly the way that they're going to do deals? And Trey Smith does become the highest paid guard in the NFL with his contract at an average of $23.5 million per year. That is by far the highest in the NFL at the guard position. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about and focus on today on Locked On Chiefs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So go check out FanDuel. We really do appreciate their sponsorship. There is a ton to talk about when it comes to this Trey Smith deal. A lot of money going to Trey Smith. 4 years, $94 million, a lot more than I ever expected that they would be paying him, but they got the deal done, and that's what's important. That's what really matters right now. So when you start looking at how this is going to break down, he's 26 years old. He will be 30 when this deal ends. And there is going to be some talk about, did they overpay him? When you look at the rest of the NFL guard market, he is $2.5 million above the next highest paid guard in the NFL. So it is very easy to look at this and say they overpaid for Trey Smith. The one thing that they have going for him, and this is something I'll talk about a lot more in the salary cap to update later, but one thing that they have going for him is they kept his cap numbers down a lot lower than I expected them to, and I will tell you how they did that in just a moment. But the thing is when you start looking at the salary cap, he's got a 14.25 salary cap number in 2025, which is going to add $9 million worth of cap space for the Chiefs in 2025. There's a lot that they can do with that. We will talk about that in the coming week. But next year in 2026, his cap number is 24.25. In 2027 and 2028, it's $27.75 million for his deal. He did get a signing bonus of about $17 million. So that gets spread out across the contract at $4.25 million per year. $46.75 million fully guaranteed, with $70 million essentially being guaranteed. And you do have a little bit of guaranteed salary in 2026, which is part of why that is such a large number, 46.75. But then he also has something that will kick in and will guarantee part of his contract in March of 2026. If he's still in Kansas City, his third year in 2027 will become guaranteed. Essentially, it becomes a 3-year deal for about $70 million in guaranteed money, which is all the $70 million is guaranteed for injury purposes. 46.75 is guaranteed currently under salary, but I do believe that in March of 2026, 2027 will become fully guaranteed. They would have to cut him in order for that not to be guaranteed, from my understanding of this contract, which means it's essentially guaranteeing him $70 million. The interesting thing I think on this is $2.5 million above the current guard market, which tells you that they were expecting that they were going to be paying him top market deal regardless. But it's interesting because they're paying him just a little bit more than what it would cost the franchise tag. If you take the franchise tag times 3 or times 4, it's just a little bit more than what they're paying him. It would have been like $93.6 million. At this point, it's $94 million. So they're paying him $23.5 million for the year. This is a deal that I expected to get done. I didn't expect it to get done at this rate. I did expect that it would be closer down to $22.5 million. So this came in at about $1 million higher than I was expecting on a year-to-year basis. However, this does give Kansas City a interior offensive line with Creed Humphrey and with Trey Smith that is one of the best duos in the NFL. If they can get even average to above average play at the left guard spot, and then you figure out your tackle situation with maybe Josh Simmons in 2025 or 2026, and you get Jalen Moore as your right tackle in 2026. I do think that you have at least 3/5 of this Chiefs offensive line under contract for maybe even 4/5 of this Chiefs offensive line under contract for the next 4 years. Well, yeah, for the next 4 years at this point. 3 years, I guess, because Kingsley Suamataia, if he is considered the starter at left guard, would only be here for 3 more years. So I do think that this is a great starting point for the Chiefs. I was a little surprised about the way that they structured the contract. $17 million in a signing bonus was probably a little bit lower than I would have expected, but they came in and they did something that they don't normally do, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next segment. But it is interesting that they structured the deal this way. This tells me that they're looking forward and they're looking at how this is going to affect their cap, not only in 2025, but how it's going to affect what they can do in 2026, 2027, 2028, as long as he's under contract. So I do think that this deal becomes a lot more real, or a lot more sustainable and a lot cheaper feel to it once you get into 2025, because I do think that this is going to be a deal that is going to be used and probably beat even in 2026, and maybe even considerably. The cap went up a lot higher than the Chiefs were even expecting this year. That's the only reason they were able to franchise tag Trey Smith. They were expecting the cap to be about 270. It ended up being about 279. With that extra $10 million, they franchised Trey Smith. Now they get that money back and they're able to use it however they want in 2025, or maybe they are going to save it and roll it over to 2026. We will see what they do with that. But I do find this interesting that Kansas City has kind of changed, at least with this contract, the way they do contracts and how they structure their first-year deals. And I wonder if that does mean that maybe they're looking and trying to make some other extensions before, not necessarily before training camp, but before the regular season starts, kind of like they did with Noah Gray in the previous year. And we're going to talk a lot more about that right after this. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And don't forget, you can also bet in the Home Run Derby and the MLB All-Star game that is going to be coming up very soon on FanDuel. Go check it out. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. One of the biggest things that sticks out to me when I look at this deal is the way that the Chiefs structured it. And it really sticks out because if you go back and you look at specifically Creed Humphrey's deal from last year, he signed a deal and he got the highest paid. He became one of the highest paid interior linemen. He became the highest paid center in the NFL last year with his new contract. He get $18 million a year. With $35 million fully guaranteed at signing and an $18 million signing bonus. So Trey Smith got a smaller signing bonus, and Creed Humphrey got $50.3 million guaranteed for injury. So Trey Smith got a lot more when you start looking at the injury. But what really sticks out to me is Kansas City, the way that they have done contracts in the past is they take the first year base salary and they make it as low as they possibly can for whoever has for the year and the amount of time that player's been in the NFL. Last year, Creed Humphrey had a base salary of $1.125 million. He did that because he got a huge signing bonus. He didn't care. So it makes sense from that aspect. But when you look at Trey Smith's deal, it's completely different. He got a base salary in 2025 of $10 million. This is a completely different way Kansas City has been doing contracts in the past couple of seasons. And I'm really surprised that they're doing this but it could also mean that they're kind of going to be looking at things in a different perspective. If you look at Nick Bolton's deal, who got a 3-year deal, his base salary in 2025 is $2 million. And you look at some of the other deals that Kansas City has done over the past couple of years, and I know this one's not going to be as popular because of the player, but when they signed Jawan Taylor to a contract, just as an example, in 2023, his base salary was $1.08 million. My point is, by moving money up in the contract and by making it more salary versus bonus, you're not delaying as much. So you're in a situation where Creed Humphrey has a $4.25 million cap hit every single year for his signing bonus. Jawan Taylor's signing bonus was $27 million, and I know it's a completely different position, but his signing bonus came in around, looks like somewhere around $5 million a year, which makes about sense. So you're at that point, $5.5 million a year was allocated on the contract, and they made some adjustments. That's what was throwing me off on looking at that one. But when you look at what this is going to mean for the future and for Kansas City, it's one of those things where you're taking some of the money that you would normally spread out into future years, and you're accelerating it into the current year. So now you're in a situation where you're paying him a salary next year, guaranteed salary, Trey Smith, for $20 million, 19.75 with a workout bonus of $250,000. So in total, it would be $20 million if you take the workout bonus and his guaranteed salary plus his signing bonus, which gets you to the $24,250, which is a lot closer when you start marrying your cash to your cap hit. And that is not the way Kansas City has generally done it the first couple of seasons. It's usually been one of those things where the salary is very low in the first couple of seasons, even because if you look at Creed Humphrey's deal, we go back to looking at that, and Nick Bolton's salary that they just signed earlier this year is 14.75 next year. So that's a little bit more in line with what they did with Trey Smith as well. But Creed Humphrey's deal in 2024 gave him a base salary of almost $7 million in 2025. And that's a guaranteed salary. It's fully guaranteed. Creed is getting $10 million more, well, $13 million more almost guaranteed in his second year than Creed Humphrey did. And I understand different positions, and that's how the way the NFL works. That's fine. But changing the way that you do your base salaries, changing the way you start structuring some of these contracts really tells me that Kansas City is starting to look at the salary cap and go, okay, we have to adjust how we're doing things. We have to make it to where we have a little bit more flexibility in the future. And one of the ways to do that is we have a year right now where you have a ton of salary cap space. You have over $20 million available in salary cap space as it sits right now in 2025. And we'll talk about that in the next segment and what they can do with that and why I think that they're leaving that kind of money available. But the reality is that you have the ability now to roll some of that money forward to 2025 to 2026 and use it to maybe redo Patrick Mahomes' contract, which usually a deal like that is going to free up even more space, especially if you add a couple of years onto the contract, which I would think that the Chiefs are going to be wanting to do in the near future, 2025, 2026, 2027, somewhere in that range. Obviously, they can't do it this year, but that was always expected to be the time that they would maybe look at not necessarily tearing up the contract, but maybe making some adjustments and adding years to the end of it. So I do think that that's something the Chiefs will be looking at in 2026, and this gives them more ammo to be able to do something like that. It also gives them more ammo to be able to spend more money this year if they want to. But again, I go back to this Trey Smith deal, and you start looking at the context of it and the numbers. Base salary of $10 million in 2025, base salary of $19.75 million in 2026, base salary of $23.25 million in 2027 and 2028. And I did find I was correct in the last segment. On March 15th of 2026, his 2027 salary becomes fully guaranteed. So if he is on the roster as of March 15th of 2026, his salary becomes guaranteed in 2027. That doesn't mean that that's what his salary cap number is going to be, and they could still make some adjustments. They could, do a bonus proration and spread some of the money out. Although with a shorter contract, and this is the other reason why I kind of wanted them to go with a longer deal, is you don't have the ability to kind of play with the money that you have done with like a Patrick Mahomes contract. I understand that's not going to happen with an offensive lineman. I get that. But when you do have a longer contract, a 5-year contract, you have that extra year to move bonus proration down. With a 4-year deal, you really don't have that flexibility. If they're going to do anything with his contract, it will be in 2026. I just don't see why that they would want to be doing that, considering the way that other things are structured. And you have some other deals that are going to be falling off. Travis Kelce is a big one in 2025. I still don't think he returns in 2026, but that's going to be one of those things where his cap number is going to go away. So you are going to free up some more space. But you have other players that you're going to have to deal with in other contracts you're going to have to deal with. And I do think that that's kind of why they looked at Trey Smith's deal and they said, okay, we're going to adjust the way we do this. We're going to put more base salary in year one and not give a signing bonus and keep his numbers a little bit lower in 2027 and 2028, because it also keeps his salary cap number lower, which gives them the ability to be in a situation where they don't necessarily have to cut him because his salary cap number becomes astronomical. So I do think that that's kind of the thought process that they're using here. I love that they're using this thought process. At least it appears that they're using this thought process, because it does mean that they're planning for what they're going to be doing in 2026, 2027, 2028. They have to be doing that. And you have a lot of players that are going to be needing contracts over the next couple of years. Trent McDuffie, if you're going to keep him. George Karlaftis, if you're going to keep him. Both those guys would be great to be getting contract extensions this year. Rashee Rice is another one that isn't going to be eligible after this season, or eligible right now, but would be eligible after the 2025 season and going into a season where he could be suspended for some of the games. Maybe that plays into what his contract would be, maybe not. I don't know that they would go that direction regardless, because I do think that the Chiefs aren't going to spend a lot of money at wide receiver. I think this deal specifically shows where they intend to spend their money. They intend to spend their money on offensive line. They intend to give Patrick Mahomes the best protection they can, because if they give him the best protection they can, he will stay upright, he will stay healthy, and he has proven he will take them to the Super Bowls, multiple Super Bowls, and have them in the ability to at least win a Super Bowl. Last year, obviously, didn't work out because of the offensive line and because of injuries there. Hopefully, they've got that figured out, and this Trey Smith deal solidifies at least having Creed and Trade next to each other for the next 3 or 4 years. And then you're in a situation where if you get a hit with Josh Simmons, this offensive line is looking very good at least 3 of the 5 positions, and you are set for the next several seasons. You have to then figure out the left guard position and right tackle. But again, if they are looking at the right tackle position and thinking that Juwan Taylor's gone after this year, moving Jalen Moore over at $15 million for a right tackle when you have a left tackle on rookie contract is doable, which gives them a good offensive line, a good foundation for an offensive line in 2026 as well as 2025. So I do think that this move and this deal sets them up. When we get back, we're going to talk about what this is going to mean for the salary cap. We're going to dive into what I think they could be doing with the salary cap right after this. Kansas City gets a deal done with Trey Smith. He is now the NFL's highest paid guard in the entire league, and that is not really a surprise. He was going to be the highest paid guard regardless this season, even if he was under the franchise tag. But now with a long-term deal in place, he's definitely going to be the highest paid guard, because he's getting paid $23.5 million in 2025. On an average of $23.5 million in 2025 and going forward. What does this do for Kansas City in their salary cap space going forward? As of right now, before this move, they were sitting at about $10 million in salary cap space. After this move, the Chiefs have about $20 million in salary cap space, just over $20 million in salary cap space. What does that mean? What are they going to do with it? Now, I do want to throw in a little bit of the caution here. There is something to consider that this isn't going to be what they have going into the regular season, because don't forget, this time of year, you're only accounting for the top 51 contracts. So anybody that's not on top 51 contract is not counting on the salary cap right now. That does mean that once you get to the regular season and you have your regular season cut downs and you have anybody that you put on PUP or anybody that's on IR or anybody that's on NFI or any of those types of lists, plus your practice squad, all of those players' salaries have to be accounted for in the team salary cap. Generally speaking, based on what they've done in the prior years, Kansas City was probably going to get to a point where they were pretty close to maybe needing another $4 or $5 million in salary cap space when you start taking into account other contracts to add to this. Obviously, it all depends on injuries and how that shakes out. So there's some other things that could go into it as well. But when you start looking at it, they were going to need about $5 million of that $10 million, at least, maybe a little bit more, to get this deal to where they were probably having about $3 to $4 million in cap space available when the season started. That is about where they have generally been going into most seasons. They have generally kept about $3 to $5 million in salary cap space available to operate throughout the season. And so it's not shocking that that's about where they would have been with this Trey Smith before the Trey Smith deal. Now you're in a situation where you can add another $10 million to that. What does that mean for this team? What are they going to do with that $10 million? It could mean that they do nothing and they just take that $10 million and now they have $13 million in cap space for 2025. And whatever they don't use in 2025 just rolls over to 2026. And if that's what happens, it somewhat makes sense. And the reason I say that, because as it sits right now, the Kansas City Chiefs are $60 million over the projected salary cap in 2026. Now, there are going to be some things that are going to make some adjustments. Patrick Mahomes, for example, has a $78 million cap hit in 2026. That's not going to happen. We obviously don't know what the salary cap space is going to be, what the total salary cap space is going to be in 2026 as well. So right now, it looks like estimated around $290 million. It's possible that it could be a little bit higher. It could be a little bit lower. But Mahomes' number is $78 million. Nothing is guaranteed to Juwan Taylor past 2025. So at this point, it's one of those things where if you cut him, you free up close to $20 million in cap space just by cutting him for the 2026 season. You already kind of have a guy in Jalen Moore that is signed that could probably be shifted over and play that right tackle position. Or maybe they have somebody like an Ethan Driscoll, who we've talked about a lot, that could be a guy that could step in and maybe give you a really cheap option at that right tackle position if he's able to grow into that position. We haven't seen anything. We'll know a lot more when training camp opens here in a couple of days. But it's possible Kansas City's looking at it and saying, okay, we have this money, we need this money, and we'll roll it forward. It's also possible that they're looking at it and going, okay, we just freed up $10 million. What can we do with $10 million in 2025? Well, you have two guys, at least two guys. You have Trent McDuffie, who has a $4.5 million cap number in 2025. And you have George Karlaftis, who has a $3.8 million cap number in 2025. Both of those guys could be looked at as potential extensions for the Chiefs. I'm not going to get into what I think those numbers are going to be, but Sauce Gardner just got a new contract right after the Trey Smith news broke. It was announced that Sauce Gardner got a new contract, which will pay him about $30.1 million a year in $30.1 million in new money for Sauce Gardner, which is going to make him the league's highest paid corner. I don't expect Trent McDuffie is going to get that, but I do think that could play a factor into what Kansas City is going to be looking at. And I do think that they were looking at trying to figure out, how do we pay McDuffie? How do we pay Karlaftis? And by freeing up some of this cap space, they have the ability to maybe consider doing that now. Another guy that they consider is Leo Chenal. He's got a $3.6 million cap in 2025. Is it possible that they look at Leo and say, hey, we'll pay you, $4 or $5 million a year to play for the next 3 to 4 years? I don't know what that deal looks like and how much they would have to pay him to get it done, but it's possible they will be looking at that. And the nice thing is with the way they've structured contracts in the past, especially the larger contracts, they've kept the salary low. So you could essentially get it to a point where you're almost net neutral in a deal with a Leo Chenal or probably not Karlaftis or McDuffie, because they're going to be getting paid a lot more money. But maybe a Leo Chenal, you could keep it to where it's more contract neutral. You drop his base salary way down. You give him a decent signing bonus, and you still keep it around $3.5 million. Maybe it goes up to $5 million. Maybe it goes up to $6 million. But that's still a little bit more breathing room that the Chiefs didn't have before this deal got done with Trey Smith. So it does give them the wiggle room to be able to make a deal with a guy like Leo Chenal. It does give them the wiggle room to be able to try to figure out, okay, how do we pay a guy like Trent McDuffie? The nice thing with McDuffie, and the same thing could be said for Karlaftis, is you've already picked up their fifth-year options. So right now you have Trent McDuffie under contract. He's got a salary cap number of 4.45. Karlaftis is at 3.8. In 2026, McDuffie's salary cap number goes to 13.6, and Karlaftis's goes to 15.2. So you're going to have a huge bump with those two contracts, which is expected, but it gives you at least a floor of some sort to deal with and say, well, this is money that we've already got in the contract. So you feel better about where that's going to be. You know what they're going to be under contract for. You can try to get a deal done now, and maybe you can get a deal done before. I think Trent McDuffie is going to have a good season. I think Karlaftis is going to have a good season. Is it going to be enough to where Karlaftis is going to be demanding $30 million a year? I don't think so. But I do think it's going to be a better season than he had last year. He's got another year in the system. He understands what Spagnuolo is looking for. Charles Omenihu being there and being able to give pass rush the entire season should help him as well. So I do think Karlaftis could have a very big season. McDuffie has somebody next to him in Christian Fulton who I think can help as well. Then you have Jalen Watson, and you just drafted Noel Williams, not to mention any of the other corners that the Chiefs have. So I do think both of those guys could have better years in 2025 than they had in 2024, which means it's going to cost you more to sign them if you wait. So maybe they're looking at this and just saying, okay, well, we can use some of this money to try to get a deal done with Trent McDuffie, or try to get it done with Karlaftis, or try to get it done with Leo Chenal. Lots of different ways that they can spend the salary cap money if they choose to spend it. Again, one of the options is not spend it, carry it forward to 2026, and let it go and see what goes on and see how it shakes out in 2026, because you are going to have some other guys you got to get figured out. Chris Jones is on the salary cap in 2026 for a bunch of money. His cost right now is 23.6. In 2026, it balloons to $44.85 million. That is not sustainable in Kansas City. He's got a guaranteed salary of $35 million. I do think the Chiefs are going to have to make an adjustment there as well. So that could also be playing into this Trey Smith contract and the way they structured this and how they're going to do things. But the Chiefs have a lot of different things that are working in their favor. This deal, while it seems like it's probably a little bit higher than I expected, I'm okay with it. I like the structure. I think it's a better structure than they have generally used in the past, and it shows that they're planning for things in the future. So I like that as well. Let me know what you think in the comments. Tell me what you think about this contract. Tell me what you think about what they paid Trey Smith and what it could mean for the future. We will be back tomorrow to talk a lot more about the Chiefs as they get ready for training camp. Thank you for listening today, and we will talk to you tomorrow.